There comes a moment, quiet, unannounced, when your body knows before your mind does. A moment when staying feels heavier than leaving, when shrinking hurts more than standing alone, and if you're waiting for permission to choose yourself, this is it. Because the truth no one tells you is this: choosing yourself will cost you people, and not choosing yourself will cost you you. You've been taught that belonging is the prize, that being liked is safety, that staying agreeable keeps the peace. But here's the hard truth: real belonging never asks you to abandon yourself. If you have to betray your values, silence your needs, or edit your truth just to stay connected, what you have is not belonging, it's survival. Choosing yourself feels selfish at first because you've been rewarded your whole life for self-abandonment. You were praised for being easy, for being flexible, for being the one who didn't make waves. And every time you swallowed your truth to keep others comfortable, the world clapped. But your nervous system kept score. Your body remembered, your heart remembered. Walking alone is not the same as being lonely. Loneliness is what happens when you're surrounded by people who don't see you. Solitude is what happens when you finally stop lying to yourself. And yes, it's terrifying, because when you choose yourself, the noise fades. The distractions fall away, and you're left face to face with who you really are. That's where courage lies, not in staying, not in enduring, but in the quiet, trembling decision to say, I will not abandon myself again. This is where the journey actually begins. When you choose yourself, don't expect applause, expect confusion, expect resistance, expect people to say, you've changed, like it's an accusation. What they really mean is you stopped bending. And that makes them uncomfortable. Here's the part that hurts the most. Some people don't miss you. They miss who you were when you made yourself smaller so they could feel bigger. They miss your silence, your overgiving, your willingness to carry what was never yours. And when you stop doing that, the relationship doesn't just change, it reveals itself. You'll be tempted to explain, to justify, to prove that you're still kind, still good, still worthy of love. But listen closely. People who benefit from your self-sacrifice will never understand your self-respect. And trying to make them understand will drain you faster than the loneliness ever could. Choosing yourself means letting go of the fantasy that everyone will come with you. They won't. Some can't. Some don't want to. And some were only meant to walk with you until you learned the lesson they came to teach. That doesn't make them villains. It makes them chapters, not the whole story. This is where grief shows up, not just grief for people, but grief for versions of yourself that survived by pleasing, performing, and pretending. You'll mourn the old rules. If I'm good enough, they'll stay. If I give more, I'll be loved. Let those rules die. They were never true. Walking alone hurts, but it hurts less than living a life that isn't yours. And every step you take away from who you were pretending to be is a step closer to who you actually are. Choosing yourself will expose the places where you learned to confuse love with endurance, where you believed that if something was hard, it must be meaningful, that if it hurt, it must be real. But love that costs you your voice is not love. It's a contract where you're always paying and never receiving. You didn't wake up one day afraid to be alone. You were trained into it. Taught subtly, repeatedly, that being chosen by others mattered more than choosing yourself. That abandonment was the worst thing that could happen. So you stayed, you overextended, you made excuses for behavior that broke your heart in quiet, invisible ways. But here's what no one prepared you for: self-abandonment is the most painful abandonment of all. It erodes you slowly. It teaches your body to brace, your mind to rationalize, your heart to numb. And the longer you stay, the harder it becomes to remember who you were before you learned to disappear. Walking alone forces you to feel again. That's why it's so uncomfortable. There's no one to distract you from your own truth. No one to blame. No one to perform for. Just you and the questions you've been avoiding. What do I need? What do I believe? What do I want? Even if no one approves, courage isn't loud. It doesn't shout or demand. Sometimes courage is a whisper that says, this hurts. but it's honest. And honesty is the foundation of any life worth living. You don't walk away because you're weak. You're weak. You walk away because something inside you finally decided it deserved more than survival. There is a particular kind of fear that shows up when you start choosing yourself, the fear of being misunderstood, not disliked. Misunderstood. Because when people misunderstand you, you can't control the story anymore. And if you've spent your life managing perceptions, that loss of control feels unbearable. You want to be seen as kind, reasonable, loving. So when you set boundaries, when you say no without an apology, when you stop over-explaining, it feels like you're breaking some unspoken rule, and you are. You're breaking the rule that says your comfort comes last. Boundaries will make people question your character, not because you've done something wrong, but because you've stopped doing what benefited them. And the hardest part, some of those people will be the ones you love most. Family, friends, people who only ever knew the version of you that complied. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop carrying what was never yours. It means you recognize the difference between compassion and self-betrayal, between empathy and exhaustion, between love and obligation. You don't owe anyone access to you at the expense of your mental health. You don't owe endless understanding to people who refuse to take responsibility. And you don't need to be understood by everyone to be at peace with yourself. Here's the truth that sets people free. You can be deeply good and still disappoint others. You can be loving and still walk away. You can honor your values without convincing anyone else to agree with them. When you stop trying to be understood by everyone, you finally understand yourself. And that clarity, that grounded knowing, becomes your new anchor when the world feels unstable. Walking alone will strip you of your distractions. No more chaos to hide in. No more fixing others to avoid facing yourself. No more noise to drown out the quiet truth you've been carrying for years. And in that silence, something uncomfortable happens. You start to feel everything you postponed. You feel the anger you swallowed to keep the peace. The sadness you minimized because others had it worse. The exhaustion that came from always being the strong one. Choosing yourself doesn't magically make these feelings disappear. It invites them to finally be acknowledged. This is the part people don't romanticize. Healing is not a highlight reel. It's messy. It's lonely. It's sitting with emotions that don't have neat explanations. It's realizing that some of your coping mechanisms were survival strategies and thanking them before letting them go. You might look around and think everyone else has it figured out. They don't. Many people stay busy to avoid this exact reckoning. They stay in familiar pain because unfamiliar peace feels too risky. But you, by walking alone, are choosing truth over comfort. There will be days when you question your decision, when loneliness creeps in and whispers that maybe you should go back to being needed, back to being chosen. But being needed is not the same as being valued. And being chosen by others means nothing if you've rejected yourself. This solitude is not punishment. It's recalibration. It's where you relearn your own rhythms, your own voice, your own worth, without an audience. And slowly, quietly, you begin to feel stronger. Not because life got easier, but because you stop lying to yourself about what you can and cannot carry. Choosing yourself will change the way you relate to pain. You stop asking, how much can I tolerate? And start asking, what do I deserve? And that shift, subtle but radical, rewrites your entire life. You begin to notice how often you once justified staying in places that drained you, how you labeled endurance as loyalty, how you called suffering growth because leaving felt like failure. But walking away is not quitting. It's discerning. It's knowing when a lesson has been learned and refusing to repeat it out of habit. This is where self-trust is built. Not in grand gestures, but in small, consistent acts of choosing your well-being, saying no when your body tightens, leaving when your values are compromised, resting without earning it. These choices may look insignificant to the outside world, but to your nervous system, they are everything. And something surprising happens when you stop over-functioning. The people who relied on you to carry the emotional load either step up or fall away. Let them. Their response is information, not a verdict on your worth, but clarity about what was actually holding the relationship together. Walking alone teaches you that peace is not the absence of conflict, it's the absence of self-betrayal. You realize that anxiety often isn't a personal flaw, it's a signal that you've been ignoring your own boundaries. The more you choose yourself, the quieter the internal chaos becomes. Not because life is perfect, but because your inner world is no longer at war with your outer choices. And that alignment, that integrity, is a kind of freedom many people never experience. At some point, walking alone stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like relief. You notice your shoulders aren't as tense. Your breath comes easier. You laugh softly at first, without checking who's watching. This is the moment you realize how heavy it was to carry expectations that were never yours. You begin to understand that not everyone is meant to go where you're going. Some people are comfortable in cycles you've outgrown. And when you choose growth, it naturally creates distance. Not because you think you're better, because you're no longer willing to be smaller. This is also where discernment replaces urgency. You stop chasing connection. You stop explaining your worth. You stop auditioning for love. Instead, you wait. You listen. You pay attention to how people make you feel after spending time with them, energized or depleted, seen or tolerated, safe or on edge. Walking alone sharpens your intuition. Without constant external noise, you can finally hear your own inner voice. And it speaks clearly. It tells you when something is off, even if it looks fine on the surface. It tells you when to lean in and when to step back. This is wisdom born from honoring yourself. And yes, fewer people will have access to you. That's not loss. That's curation. Your energy becomes sacred. Your time becomes intentional. Your relationships become deeper, not wider. Solitude teaches you something powerful. You are not too much. You are just giving too much to people who couldn't hold it. When you choose yourself, you don't close your heart. You protect it so it can finally open in the right places. Choosing yourself doesn't make you invincible. It makes you honest. You still feel fear. You still doubt. You still have moments when the old voice whispers, was this worth it? But the difference now is that you don't let fear make your decisions. You let your values do that. You start to see how often you once abandoned your truth just to avoid discomfort. How quickly you'd override your own needs to keep the peace. Now, discomfort becomes a signal, not a stop sign. It tells you where growth is happening, where boundaries are strengthening, where self-respect is taking root. Walking alone teaches you emotional resilience. Not the kind that hardens you, but the kind that steadies you. You learn that you can survive disappointment, that you can sit with uncertainty without rushing to fix it, that you don't need immediate validation to know you're on the right path. This is also where you stop romanticizing potential. You stop loving who people could be and start responding to who they actually are. And that clarity saves you years of waiting, hoping, explaining, and hurting. Reality becomes your anchor. You realize something quietly profound. Peace is not found in being chosen, it's found in choosing. Choosing alignment over approval. Choosing integrity over attachment. Choosing yourself again and again, even when it's inconvenient. And the more you do this, the less you fear walking alone, because you're no longer alone with yourself. You're finally on your own side. Choosing yourself will eventually teach you that silence can be louder than words, that absence can carry more weight than presence. When you stop bending, flattering, and performing for everyone else, you'll notice a space opens up, not empty, but full of your own voice, your own desires, your own possibilities. You'll realize that the people who matter will notice differently. They may not applaud immediately. They may question you. But eventually, authenticity has a way of drawing the right energy toward you while letting the wrong energy drift away. And that is not coincidence. It's self-respect in motion. Walking alone teaches you patience, not waiting for others, but waiting for life to meet you where you are. You learn to trust timing. You learn to trust your instincts. You learn that disappointment is not the end of the story. It's a signpost directing you toward better alignment. And alignment with yourself is priceless. You start to see patterns in relationships, in choices, in cycles of self-abandonment. And instead of beating yourself up, you start correcting them gently, intentionally, fiercely. You stop apologizing for being who you are, and you stop asking permission to exist fully in your own life. There's a sacred freedom in this. Freedom to feel without shame, to set boundaries without guilt, to walk away without needing validation. You begin to carry yourself differently, lightly, yet firmly. And with each step, the fear of walking alone diminishes, replaced by the strength of knowing I am enough, even if no one walks beside me. Choosing yourself is not a single act, it's a lifelong practice. It's showing up for yourself every day in ways both monumental and invisible. It's choosing clarity over confusion, integrity over compromise, and your own heartbeat over the rhythm someone else imposes on you. It's not easy, it's not safe, and it will cost you people you thought you couldn't live without. But it will also give you yourself in a way no one else can. When you walk alone, you discover that solitude is not emptiness, it's presence. Presence with your own truths, your own needs, your own light. You begin to notice what energizes you, what nourishes you, and what drains you. You stop confusing convenience for love, obligation for loyalty, and approval for worth. You start living in alignment with your deepest values, and that alignment becomes the compass for every decision you make. Yes, walking alone is terrifying, but terror is not your enemy. It is the signal that growth is happening, that fear is being transformed into courage, and that your soul is being reclaimed. You begin to understand that the people who stay in your life do so because they resonate with your truth, not your performance. And that is the most profound form of connection you will ever experience. So step forward, even if no one follows. Speak your truth, even if it echoes into silence. Love yourself, even when the world doesn't understand. Because in the end, the only person you cannot afford to abandon is the one staring back at you in the mirror. Walk alone if you must. Stand tall and know choosing yourself is the bravest, most beautiful act of all.